All right, this is Brittany, and we are on Metaphysical Files of True Crime, and today we're talking about Gary Ridgway.
Hi, and I'm Joanna, and this has been very interesting so far this morning.
Okay, so I'm just gonna flat out say it. I do this little thing when I tap into energy, where I like wash my hands to get compartmentalized into their energy and very empathically feel the emotions that they have felt. And I love doing that kind of reading on people because like it's usually very validating for a person that I'm reading. And I can really start to see their behavior mannerisms, their thoughts, their emotional expressions, how they saw the entire world. And I know Gary Ridgway is still alive.
Yes.
So I thought it would be cool to kind of tap into him in this way to see what we get. And I am going to just be honest with you. Setting up the podcast after tapping into his energy was a mistake because literally like every little thing that you did, like how you put the chair down, how like I was just like, you're not doing it right.
To be outside the window.
Rawr. And like your cup is blocking my view. It was like this this rage that I can't even begin to put in words. So okay, well, I guess how do you want to start this? Do you want to share a summary, or do you think that I should just read the energy first and then we do a summary of who Gary Ridgway really is? And I want to stress, if you're new here and you just found this channel or you just found the podcast, I specialize in psychology and spirituality to help people work through emotional issues and read patterns and ancestral patterns, cycles. I am a psychic medium. I pull things from like the Akashic records and past life trauma. I basically all things spiritual. Trying to find a way to help you work through mental health and, your everyday life. And so one might ask, why in the world did we choose this? I started this podcast back, I would say October 2024. I decided that I wanted to, I was convinced that evil didn't exist and I would like to prove that. And I just think it's hilarious because most spiritual people are like, oh, let's just channel love and light and blissful experiences. And I'm like over here like, let's channel the dark shit and understand the darkness.
Darkness, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll just give like a very brief timeline for Gary Ridgway when he started. But I will leave out a lot of details just so you can tap into his energy. So Gary Ridgway was an American serial killer active from 1982 to 2001. He was also known as the Green River Killer. He confessed to unaliving 71 victims, but was convicted of 49 killings in total. He was arrested in November of 2001 after DNA evidence finally linked him to several victims. And that's all I'll give for now because I feel like you picked so much up.
Yeah.
So
before we got into this, I kind of like sat down and got my bearings and started kind of reading what I was getting. And Joanna, you've been so helpful with like validating it. So I'm going to kind of go through what I picked up, and I'm also going to elaborate a little bit more on what exactly was coming up to the surface for me. So right off the bat, there's a boxed-in mentality around Gary. What that means and what that usually looks like, it indicates that there's some sort of ancestral pattern where he, in some other experiences of either different generations from this lifetime and then also other lifetimes that he experienced, were relating to Catholicism and, almost like a religious tyranny. And I even see a past life trauma on him right off the bat. That's more so like not the executor, but like the one that like picks out, like the religious zealot, the one that like kind of like goes and tells on people, like the common people.
Yeah.
And like and then like they're reported and then like executed shortly after. And I feel like in that lifetime that I'm picking up, he was widely persecuted by the common people. But yet he was seeking approval from the Catholic Church. He wanted to feel like he was valid, important, special, needed, and seen. And he, like I even see him like holding his hands up in the air, like this, like, you know, like I did what was right in the eyes of God, and like it was like this total like righteous justice, and he could justify his actions, even bringing people to a death, because it was in the name of God. And there was like this complete like zealous energy within him that comes through. I don't really pick up how he passed away, and I'm kind of thinking that it's not about that. It's more about like what kind of, you know, like what kind of mindset he had in this past life that I'm referencing. And those of you that aren't aware of this, when we're talking about reincarnation, a soul can reincarnate many hundreds of times, you know, if not thousands, you know, and so within that confined, you know, like there's so much trauma that is experienced, and some of that trauma will bleed into everyday life even now. You know, when you start to kind of tap more into, you know, your experiences, there's always some sort of emotional charge that will come through it.
And it's really interesting that you brought up his past life with religion, because in this life, Gary was very religious at times, quoting the Bible, even going door to door. And he had so much conflict between what he was doing to his victims and what he believed in religiously.
Yeah, and I would imagine in this lifetime he would be attracted to that, not only from the past life energy, but also there is a strong, clear black and white thinking going on here. Very polarized, this or this, very ultimatum type energy. And with his whole mindset, you know, like I would imagine that polarity that he felt and still feels even to this day, somehow makes him feel more stable and makes him feel more structured in the areas of his life where he didn't. Now, if we're going all the way back to when he was in the womb, the most predominant most predominant wound that I pick up is more of like humiliation, which is very interesting because I've seen pictures of him and he doesn't have that on his face, but it's a very predominance of humiliation wounds and then rejection wounds underneath the surface. And so just to kind of elaborate a little bit on what humiliation wounds are, there's 5 soul wounds that a soul can experience, and usually on average they'll experience about 4 of those wounds in any given lifetime, sometimes even bringing in some of the wounds from other lifetimes. And the wound of humiliation is significant because it's all intertwined with shame. And shame is different from guilt, right? Because guilt is like where we did something wrong and when we got that in the pit of our stomach, and sometimes we have so much of it that it starts to turn into shame. And then through shame, it's the belief that there's something inherently wrong with you.
Yeah.
And from before he can even remember his life, there was a feeling of, I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me. And it wasn't like, I don't feel like he had an awareness of how much that was impacting him, but people with shame will automatically want to overcompensate in different areas. And you can see that a lot with a person who maybe overindulges with food and different compulsive, behaviors. And a lot of times even with their own loved ones and family, they tend to, overcompensate. They're very loving and giving and things like that. And they tend to be the rescuer, within the confines of like a victim triangle, where the rescuer, you have the victim and then also the persecutor. And I can see where that was very predominant in his experience, kind of coming in through the womb. However, the other side of this is the rejection wounds. Rejection wounds make a person withdraw. make a person disassociate. I feel like from day one, there's almost like a feeling of disassociating from my body because of my childhood. And so that brings me to kind of address an elephant in the room here. Dad, I picked up immediately. His dad was a coward. That's how he sees, and this is how he sees the world according to this reading, okay? So his dad was a mother-loving coward. And his mom was invalidating and narcissistic, verbally abusive. I do pick up some physical abuse, so I'm going to lean into that. But there's a perversion of the energy, too, where there is sexualized behavior. And so when I look at Gary Ridgway, if I'm just energetically looking at him, because I know he's still alive, I see usually around a person's neck towards like the left side on an aura layer. There's every single time that I see somebody with these certain colors and like ridges within that aura layer, it indicates incest. Like they've experienced a form of like incest abuse.
Yes.
And that's very predominant in his energy. Like, and I'm 1010% sure there's incest there. I have so much to say, so please don't share too much. But how am I doing with what I've got so far?
Yes, the dad was definitely a coward, and the mother was definitely abusive, aggressive, domineering, verbally abusive, and Gary also looked at his dad as not manly enough because he cowered to the mom. And there's so much more that I want to say about the incest part, but if you want to read into that more.
Well, so the incest is a multi-generational incest, meaning that mom has experienced incest, and it looks like it goes further and further and further and further back, but there's a complete perversion of the energy. And it's interesting that I'm saying perversion specifically. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about like the word pervert. I'm talking about a perversion of the energy, meaning like it transmuted, like it shifted. There's a feeling predominantly of like it being one way one day and then it flipped, and it feels like there's almost like this power play between Gary Ridgway and his mom. And it actually makes me look at incest differently, surprisingly, when I'm reading it from this angle, because I've wondered in the past, like why an adult is attracted, to a child, or why there's this I don't know how to put it, like this perversion of the energy. And it's so far-fetched, or at least in my realm, in my life, it's like, how can someone go to that, like, how can they get to that level? But it's a perversion of the energy, meaning like, it's like that person flips into, there's a power play between the two parties, and there's this flip of this adult trying to take back their power, and they're doing it in a sexualized way. And so it's almost like I see like Gary and his mom literally like in a tug of war of power, and through that tug of war of power, it's like it flipped into like more like sexualized energy that was very aggressive. And it's interesting. Let me take a breath for a second. From a spiritual standpoint, when we're talking about sexual energy, it also can be equated to creative energy, but then it also can be equated to aggression. So like all three of those energies are like one and the same, like energetically when you look at it. So it's like I'm fascinated with how much, I think there's something underneath the surface here. Like, just a side note, maybe that's something we could cover in another episode, talking about more ancestral trauma, mm-hmm. and talking about how ancestral trauma plays into that, and then also how it plays into even like soul contracts and past lives. It's just very fascinating that I'm seeing it this way. However, I do want to kind of stop for a moment, and like we're gonna put a pin on mom and dad, okay. And I want to kind of unravel what I picked up right out the gate. I heard these words exactly: fucking acknowledge me. I'm not understood. You're not understanding me. I need this to look my way right now. And as I was hearing that, I was getting like anger, and like my fuel tank of anger just filled, and it's like I blew a freaking gasket. So right off the bat, I'm gonna say Gary Ridgway had a Jekyll and Hyde kind of personality. Very like light switch. Like he could go from like being super loving and like it's like, oh my God, Gary's so sweet, to oh my God, I think I might die. Like, and that's the kind of energy. I do pick up mental health issues because he was so highly reactive and he was so attached. You know, like we covered Ridgway, Richard Ramirez. And Richard Ramirez had anger, but he was nonchalant about life. So while he did have some sort of attachment to the stuff around him, he was not attached in the way that I'm going to flat out say Gary fucking Ridgway was so damn attached to everything and how it showed up and how it looked and how he felt about it. And it had to look a certain way in order to be a certain thing. And that kind of goes into that black and white thinking. It's like very like you do this or you do nothing and get the hell out of my way. And it's like this like aggression that's so it's absolutely hands down violent acts to control. That was the intent, was control.
Yeah, he definitely needed control, and he definitely had mental health issues as a teenager that were kind of even brushed under the rug. So when he was 16, he lured a 6-year-old boy into the woods and stabbed him and left the boy to die. He was caught, but he served no time. It was like a slap on the wrist from the cops. You know, he had no consequences whatsoever.
Probably went to the same church. It's so messed up.
And he showed no remorse. He walked away laughing at this little boy. And when he was asked why he did it, he just wanted to see if he could do it or not. That was basically it. Like, I just wanted to see if I can do it. And I felt like he was looking for control because he had no control in his home. All of his control was taken away from him by his mom.
Right. And that would make a lot of sense. I mean, if you even think about the religious tyranny that he felt, there was no control that he had. He was part of a system that, you know, functioned in a certain way, and he was the coin within that system. And if he deviated from what he was supposed to do in that past life, he would have been executed. So it makes sense that even in this lifetime that he would crave a sense of independence and autonomy.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting because I do pick up some self-sabotaging behaviors as well as like some sort of like compulsive disorder. He was very compulsive. Like when I say compulsive, everything would have been like to the T almost exactly the same every time he did it, every time he killed somebody. And it would be because he was literally living out a fantasy of control over the women that he violated. And when I say violated, he would have absolutely, there would be a lot of sexual assault only because it was a perversion. It was not the intent of I want to feel gratification. It was I want to take my power back. And through sexual energy, I'm going to take my power back like my mother. And then in the process, though, it was like he was choking his mother. And the like I see pantyhose involved in it too. And I feel like the pantyhose is also very symbolic because if you think about pantyhose from a society standpoint, pantyhose are like a way of like dignifying a woman.
Yeah.
And like that woman's dressed up, and it's like it's also like showing, the beauty of that like that gender and that oh God, there's like a word I feel like I want to say. It's almost like the sovereignty of the gender of a woman, and I don't mean to like put pantyhose on a pedestal, but it's like dressing like you growing up too understood that too. Like it's like dressing up involved putting pantyhose on and like appearing a certain way and like it gave its own sense of beauty. So I almost get kind of this this behavior where he stalked. He then I don't feel like the stalking part doesn't feel like it would feel like because I know like we've reviewed some serial killers who actually stalked. I don't really feel like it was that much with him, but he was observing, and it was like a trigger for him where it was the way that these women would act. It would then invoke in him the pure sense of rage and disgust and like scum of the earth, like you are nothing and I'm going to take, my power back through you. But it's like he played it out through his mom. But here's the thing. The way that he did this, it feels almost like, I feel like the pantyhose thing, I keep going back to that and I keep wanting to talk about the pantyhose thing, but it's like, I feel like the pantyhose thing is like, almost in a way like him wrapping societal shame around his victims and saying like, look, you are disgusting, you are scum of the earth, you aren't even filled with your own sovereignty and your own power. And it's, I don't feel like he consciously knew this. I feel like subconsciously he was playing out this pattern in his own mind and in his own heart. And that has more to do with what he went through as a child more than anything. And we are talking about, I'm going to say it sometimes, I don't feel like every serial killer has had a horrible upbringing, but it feels like Gary Ridgway had a lot of trauma and no way to get out that rage that he felt, and it makes me sad, and it also makes me like, oh my God, we need to like make a lot of retreats for men so that they can get their anger out, because like it's just so. But this is very societal. When I say societal, it's like the image that we put out in the world and how we look and how we feel. This is very multi-layered in that specifically, and it's relating to shame.
So he did admit that he had this great compulsive drive to kill women. And it's funny that you were picking up on, because he killed mostly sex workers and runaways. And he had this fascination with prostitutes where he would pay for them and it would eat at him because he couldn't help himself. But at the same time, he devalued their lives. He considered them disgusting and gross and less than. And but he couldn't help himself. So, and then it's funny that you're picking up on, he had this system of how he killed women. And they kind of, it's funny because the FBI kind of categorized him as low IQ, like not as high as Ted Bundy and all, the other killers. He did have kind of like an average to below average IQ. And he even said that the way he killed women was always the kind of the same. He would capture them, and he would strangle them or use pantyhose, which I did confirm, pantyhose, cords. And then because that left less evidence on their body, there wasn't a lot of blood. And then he would dump them by the Green River or in wooded areas where there wouldn't be a lot of evidence left. So he got away with it for so long because there wasn't a lot of evidence to convict him back. And he was actually brought into question in one of the first murders, but he passed a polygraph test and then they released him and they kind of cleared him, even though multiple victims said that's who did it. They even identified his truck. And there was paint evidence because he worked for a trucking company painting trucks for over 30 years, and there were paint chips left on a lot of his victims, but they couldn't convict him. And plus he passed the polygraph test.
That's very and it makes me sad for the victims, in a way, like because of like all these victims that you're referencing, like the stereotype of what he picked is symbolic of people who were fleeing out of a constricted prison that they wanted to find their own autonomy and their sense of freedom. And he chose people that were doing what he wished he could do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not like a literal like run away, like he wants to run away, but it's like the symbolism of wanting to, you know, be free, be set free from the pain that he held. And it's really interesting because when we talk about someone who has that kind of rage, right? Number one, you almost, you know, from a human standpoint, sit there and you go, wow, like that person is so heavily attached. You know, like they must not have cared at all about the human life that they took. However, right there, heavily attached. Someone who has that kind of level of rage is very attached to the way that things show up. And through that, they're attached to being the human that they are. They're also afraid of death, which is very interesting. In his behavior of acting callous and nonchalant, I feel as though it is an act. However, you know, I said, I think last episode, I don't know if it was Berkowitz that we did or Richard Ramirez, but like Berkowitz, I said I wouldn't mind being in a room with him.
Yeah.
Because I knew, I felt the energy. I knew he wasn't what people thought he was.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want to be in a room with Gary, only because Gary is very impulsive and reactive and had no way of controlling it. And I want to stress here that if he was ever released, he'd do it again, instantly. And it's because he's playing out and then it brings into question, can a person reform? Can they heal? I do feel like it's possible, but it's based in how willing are they to heal their trauma. And it's not the IQ that we should be looking at. It's the EQ, the emotional intelligence of a person that reflects whether or not they're capable of more violent acts. And the violent acts in general is a low level of consciousness, right? So that means that their awareness is low. Their understanding of how to navigate the world is more at a it would be more like at a adolescent type mentality. It's almost like the brain didn't expand more, in that area. And so I feel like Ridgway was actually intelligent, is still intelligent, but doesn't apply himself in those areas because his emotions are so like it's almost like too much to handle. And when I say that, I mean like being in his energy, I'm overwhelmed. And if I had not been doing this work for years, I would have gotten lost in the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And but since I've been doing this so long, it's like I can see the different layers, and I wish I could make someone see what I'm seeing, how it's like these different like layers, almost like the earth core, and like, how it kind of goes in the different layers within the earth core, and there's a different level of like density even with it. And so I feel like the more we get at the core, the more dense his energy was, so the more rigid, right? Because if you think about free flowing, it's loose, it's light, it's not dense, like heavy and solid, right? It's right. More like flowing, and that's what he did not have in this experience. And I keep seeing this image, it just keeps coming up over and over again, so I'm going to talk about it. I saw a red room or a dark room, I don't know how to call it. Like I see it as a red room because I'm like, it's like I'm seeing Gary standing in this room, and it's like all like a red light is on and it's dark. And I don't know what that, like at first thought I was like, oh, this is like a photography room where it goes through the process of the chemicals and all that stuff.
Right.
But I mean, and like we researched whether or not he liked photography, and he didn't. So I'm like, what does this symbolically represent? And as I just, like, the image keeps coming back up, and I get this feeling, like my throat, like I can't breathe. Like I want to breathe and I can't breathe. And I feel like the life is coming out of me. And I feel like this is symbolically talking about two different things. It's talking about the layers of like what his mental processing was of the experiences that he had, and then also it's talking about the void that he felt within him that he could never fulfill. He could never get his power back. And so when he would take the life of a woman, it was like as if he was taking the life of his mom.
That makes total sense. Yeah.
And I want to stress here that like, if you think about a dark room, right? Like in how like you take a picture and then you have to go through like the process of like putting it into these different chemicals and then air drying it and it has to have like no light, like besides like red light or whatever for it to come through. And it's like almost like this methodical perfection, like, and I think, I mean, you have to like really love photography to like want to go through that kind of process of that stuff. And I mean, because nowadays you can just take an iPhone and take a picture or, change the settings on it to make it more, what would it be like, more glorious in its own way. But like those types of negative prints are something that's like an art. So I almost get this feeling for him in his mind. It's like as if he was doing this art out. But I don't know how consciously aware he was of his, of like, because it just feels like adolescent energy that I'm picking up. Like like if I was talking to him, it would be like, talking to someone who like is like this little kid that broke a vase and he's like looking at his mom and his mom is scolding him and he says, but I didn't do it, I didn't touch it. There's no accountability for what he does and doesn't do. It's always blaming somebody else, which is its own consciousness when we blame someone, right? So there's like this whole thing behind it, and I feel like it was his defense mechanism to survive the shame that he felt from early childhood. And when I say that, I mean like when we blame someone, we take away the accountability that we have to hold from the experience, and then through taking away the accountability, then we don't have to bear the weight of shame of feeling like there's something wrong with us or feeling like we're a bad person.
Right.
So it's like this thing, but in the process of blaming someone else for what we do, we lose more of our power. So I feel like the things that he was doing to kind of get his power back, he in essence was losing his power. Did he have a family?
He did. He was actually married 3 times. And with his second wife, he had a son. And his third wife, he was even said that he actually really loved his third wife and that he killed less women during that last marriage. And he was still in that marriage when he was caught.
Interesting.
And they all did say that he had a really high sex drive. Ridgway was known to say that he would actually go back to his victims and SA them after their deaths, because then he could save money, so he wouldn't have to pay for another worker. And then the other thing that was kind of interesting is when you brought up that he's still kind of like in the adolescent mind. And I'm kind of wanting to bring that back because I feel like when he was a teenager, he was still known for bedwetting. And that's a trauma response to something, right? And then it was known that his mother would bathe him as a teenager after bedwetting. And he would become aroused during this time, which the mother knew. And then that led to him having these violent sexual fantasies about killing his mother. And that was all in that adolescent time frame. So it's kind of funny that you're saying that he's kind of has that stuck in that mindset.
So, okay. As you're talking about this, though, I'm getting like uncomfortable with your verbiage. It's just it's hilarious to me. Like, I feel like that reveals the level of shame, like, and denial within the family unit and dysfunctional family. Like it was definitely a dysfunctional family because like his like, oh God, like I feel like almost like a prude right now. Like I'm like, don't talk like that way. Don't say that. Don't, like it was just like very like what the fuck? Okay. Like I don't even know how to put that, but I just got this feeling of that. And then also, I feel like there's, okay, so bedwetting from a spiritual standpoint usually, well, I mean, okay, psychologically, I guess you could say bedwetting has a symbolism in resentment towards a parent, feeling like unseen by the parent and not acknowledged. And as I said, fucking acknowledge me. Yeah. It's like, I want to be seen. I want to be acknowledged. I want to be heard. And I feel like he took to an extreme. You got to be loud to, to be seen. And I feel like he wanted approval. It was ultimately down to this approval. So, okay. So let's kind of shift gears here because this is so far that like we're about like 36 minutes in and we have definitely gotten a little gruesome with our description of stuff. Let's kind of like shift it more into the love of this, right? Like where's the love? And again, if you're new here or if you've followed me for a while, there is love in every single thing in this world. Even the most darkest things within it, there's love. And, we've talked about how fear is an illusion, right? So there's some beauty in everything that's around us. So I want to kind of shine some light where there's a lot of shadowy, dark shit, that's coming through. Clearly there's mental health here.
Yes.
Do we know anything about his mental health, first off?
He was, after his arrest, he was diagnosed with psychopathy and personality disorder. And that was basically it, though. That's it.
So I get like a compulsive disorder. Oh, I don't know what the so like kind of obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah.
Uncontrollable repetitive thoughts and behaviors that have that feel like kind of driven to perform in a certain way or a certain context, and it helps reduce anxiety or give a sense of control. And I feel like he had like intrusive thoughts, and I feel that he had like a repetitive like things need to look this way, need to look kind of like the Clovich killer, like that we watched that movie recently where he like compulsively like tied a knot. He would stalk his victims. He'd tie a knot on, some part of their house where before he actually committed the act. And then he would sneak in, tie them up, and then, compulsively behave in the exact same way over and over and over and over again. And I feel like that's the same energy. But if you think about it, Albert Einstein said, what exactly? Repeat the same thing over and over and over again. That's the definition of insanity because you're looking for a different outcome. Mm-hmm. And I feel like in some ways what Gary Ridgway was doing was looking for another way to kind of like fulfill his sense of power and his sense of autonomy, and I would imagine being seen in love like he was at the end. That would automatically kind of reduce his compulsion because he's being seen. He's being heard, he's being felt in a way that he's never been fulfilled in his life. But also, too, you think about this kind of brings awareness to videos that people watch on a regular basis,
Right.
Corn. I'll call it corn. Of course, now I'm trying to be all like Censored. Okay, I hope this video doesn't get taken down. So, like with that said, it's like people have this compulsive behavior. And if you think about what that links to a certain chakra.
Right.
And, like there's two chakras down there, right? Like you got the root chakra that's more at the base of the spine. And then you get the other chakra, the sacral chakra, that is at the pelvic bone, right? So, sacral chakra is more symbolic for family relationships and creativity and your sexuality. But when it's in its perverted type state, like when it's like the energy is perverted, it can have more aggression. And sometimes you can even see, certain types of disorders coming from that particular chakra because it's imbalanced, right? And then the root chakra, it's a very, sacred energy because that's how it's very human, right? Because it's helping us feel more structured and stabilized in a lot of ways. And that being imbalanced in a lot of ways would make a person behave in, what would it be like? Sadistic? Not like, okay, so sadistic, but I'm also talking about sexual energy too. Like, kind of like a depravity type, bondage type energy. Then you can see that on a person. Like, it's so funny when I read somebody and I'm like reading their energy and I see their root chakra that's a bit imbalanced. I'm like, oh shit. So they have some weird kinks,
And he did. He liked, even with his wives, he liked to have sexual relations in public.
Again, being seen.
Yeah.
So, and that's voyeurism, right? Which is doing acts that are like, it's like leaving the curtains open and we're doing it in plain sight, and there's like a fascination with being seen. Being seen, like almost like this child that's protesting against a parent who says, no, we don't do those things. Don't look like that, or don't do this. That's gross. We don't do that. And it's like shaming, like that parent doing that in essence is shaming the child for having a desire.
Right. Yeah.
And so that would make the child either, number one, snuff out all of that altogether, or in turn become more depraved with it.
Right.
And so with that said, where's the love in it? I think the whole thing here, I channeled something from Spirit that said self-sabotage behaviors prevented Gary from being loved in the way that he inherently deserved as a human. And then also, I'm not enough is echoed in every act, every thought, and every notion. So let it be said that with a total lack of acceptance of ourselves and others, I think that we're capable of doing very heinous, compulsive acts.
Yeah.
And I want to stress that as humans, at some point in our reincarnations, we have had lifetimes where we've done acts that were harmful to others.
Mm-hmm.
And I paused the recording for a minute. I was talking with you, Joe, and I was really kind of hung up on where's the love in this? And I was so in my head about it. And then I kind of realized, what if that's the message here? Because I had called in his higher self already. And what if the message is not about being in your head and more about being in the state of being of love? Because love isn't just a feeling. It's the embodiment of an experience. And to experience it, is a whole nother kind of energy that you can't be in your head when you're experiencing love. And I feel like that's what kind of pulls people out of the attachments that they have. And so in some ways here, what a powerful lesson Gary Ridgway is, in that he reveals such a severe side of attachment where you're attached to the way things show up, attached how it looks, attached to the shame that you've been brought up in, attached to not being seen, attached to not being good enough.
That makes sense.
And as humans, we are celestial light beings in these human bodysuits. These human bodysuits are like our little vehicles on this earth. And you gotta treat your body with the love and the dignity it deserves. That includes your mind. It needs the love and nourishment in order to sustain itself from a longevity standpoint on this earth, but then also with the interconnectedness of connecting to others. And then also you could take this even further and say that somebody like Gary Ridgway, obviously he hasn't been through the karmic board yet. He hasn't passed away. So it's to be continued, because maybe someday we'll be channeling that. But as far as I'm concerned, calling in his higher self, the message I'm getting is what a powerful lesson in attachment, and what a powerful lesson in understanding how much shame can literally reduce us to behaviors that are so intertwined with the trauma that we experience on a regular basis.
It's really interesting. I wouldn't have looked at it that way. Yeah.
What are your thoughts, like bringing love into the situation with connecting to your intuition? What do you feel the love is in all of this?
I just feel that I felt really sorry. At first I was like, wow, this guy was horrible. Like, look at everything that he did, all of his victims. But then when you go back and you look at his childhood and you look at the things that happened, I feel like he had so many cries for help, right? Like with hurting the little boy at 16, cry for help. He was looking for attention. And he just didn't receive any. And there was no help. It was just kind of like, oh, well, he did something bad. He's going to grow out of it. Where was the consequence in that? But I feel like if he had some help with his addictions and someone intervened when he was a teenager, I feel like his life could have been changed. And I just feel like that's sad.
Well, and if you think about the construct of like a soul contract, a soul coming into this lifetime, and they commit heinous acts that are sometimes so violent and so depraved, and a large amount of people are impacted by it, right? And you got to think about the layers of the impact too. So you got the victims who are impacted. You've got the next layer, which is the society that is the norm at that time, is now going to be impacted. Right. From a media standpoint, it's a frenzy, because now they're like, look at this. This is awful. Green River Killer. And it's like this horrible thing that's going on, right? So there's multifaceted layers to the ripple effect that somebody leaves by the actions that they take, right?
Right.
And so within that confine, it's a call for compassion. I think a lot of people, growing up around, this media frenzy of the Green River Killer, were invoked into fear. And if you think about, even we could go so much further with this, think about where the United States of America is right now.
Yeah.
Like the election, everything that happened.
Right.
There are people that are, absolutely at peace with this experience. They're so excited about it. And then there are people who are devastated of the results that occurred.
And living in fear right now.
Yes. But the fear is an invitation to the love within it all. And the love sometimes isn't just like, oh, I see this person differently. It's seeing yourself in it, finding the empathy in it, finding the compassion in all of it. And it starts by you acknowledging the emotional charges that you have within the experience of that. I think the last thing that I'm just going to say is that when you're attached to a given outcome, you will experience heavy emotions relating to that outcome, right? But then within that attachment, you are imprisoned to it. So it's a false sense of security, a false sense of control that you gain by being attached to a given outcome. So that the biggest thing here is to let go of the way that you attach yourself to this world. And when I say let go, can you allow for a moment things to be exactly how they are? Can you allow yourself to be in a scarcity mindset for a minute? Can you allow yourself to have that heavy emotion? Can you allow yourself to see a person in office that you didn't want to see in office? Can you allow yourself to have a different outcome than what you expected? That's how you bring love into this.
I think that's a great message. I think we all forget that sometimes.
Yeah.
Letting go is so powerful.
Yeah. And I think people get so conflicted with what that means to let go. And I feel like it's really important to recognize that that letting go is not. I love the way that my spirit guides kind of talked about letting go. I'm going to kind of talk about that for a minute because this is very much so like Gary Ridgway. It's like we were walking along the riverbank, right? Your parents are walking along the riverbank and they're just picking up rocks, constantly picking up rocks. And so then because they were picking up rocks, you pick up rocks. And then you pass that on to your friends and like everybody else around you, like strangers and everything, because they're picking up rocks, you're picking up rocks, everybody's picking up rocks. And these rocks are symbolic for the emotional upheaval, the attachments that we have about everyday life, the outcomes that we desire, the people, the places, the things that we want to appear a certain way. And we're just carrying all these damn rocks.
All this weight with us, yeah.
And those rocks, over time, if you think about carrying like rocks, like just, over time, like maybe you might extend your shirt out, or you might like shove them in your pockets, and then your arms are full, your hands are full. You might even stick a few in your like underneath your neck and like hold your neck, and like it's very uncomfortable the more rocks you keep holding, right?
Right.
And I think that from a spiritual sense, learning the art of surrender, and by surrendering meaning you turn around and you go, you know what, my parents are doing this, everyone around me is picking up damn rocks. I don't want to carry these rocks. It's hurting my back, it's hurting my body to kink my body in certain ways to hold everything. I'm just gonna drop it. And then it's almost like this radical awareness of like, all right, I'm just gonna drop this, I'm gonna put it down. And before long, if you've put down all those rocks, what you go into a state of being is love. And it's the embodiment of it, because now your body is freely flowing. You have no attachment to the emotions that are coming up, no attachment to the people. And I'm not talking about like this detachment, like this coldness.
Right.
It's more of the detachment where you can look at a person and you can see them in their entirety. And you can make the allowance for them to exist, for them to be there, for them to behave in the mannerisms that they need to behave in, right?
Right.
And I think that's a big lesson when we're talking about somebody like Gary Ridgway, is how much can we let go of our attachments?
Yeah, that's so powerful in itself. I feel like when you let go and you allow people to be who they are, then they feel that love, and it's less restriction for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah, very powerful.
All right, so do you have anything before we start reading off the victims?
No, I think you just really changed my view on him. And I think that's really powerful in itself.
All right, so let's go ahead and get right into reading each victim here. Wendy Caulfield, 16. Deborah Bonner, age 23. Marcia Chapman, age 31. Cynthia Hines, age 17. Opal Miles, age 16. Gail Matthews, age 23. Terry Milligan, 16. Sandra Major, age 20. Alma Smith, age 18. Dolores Williams, age 17. Patricia Yellow Robe, age 38. Roberta Hayes, age 21. Patricia Osborne, 19. Shirley Sherrill, 18. Denise Bush, 23. Kimmy Pitzer, 16. Marie Malvera, 18. Carol Christensen, 21. Martina Arthur Lee, 18. Cheryl Wims, 18. Angela Grinder, 16. April Buttram, 17. Tracy Winston, 19. Rebecca Marrow, 20. Kimberly Nelson, 21. Mary Sue Bello, 25. Constance Nunn, 21. Deborah Estes, 15. Kelly Ware, 22. Tina Thompson, 21. Colleen Brockman, 15. Catherine Devine, 21. Pammy Event, 16. Patricia Barsky, 19. Cindy Smith, 17. Dawn White, 16. Maureen Feeney, 19. Kelly McGinnison, 18. Vicky Woodward, 19. Delise Pager, 22. Sandra Gabbert, 17. Melinda Reeves, 26. Patricia LeBlanc, 15. And Lisa Yates, 19. That was a very long list.
49 victims. And he confessed to about 70, but 49 confirmed.
Okay.